And I will be reading Mark 14, 3-9. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why the waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want. But you will not always have me." She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. I tell you the truth. Wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Blessings, Dwight, as you bring us the message.
Good morning. This morning we are concluding our series on heart matters, taken from Mark chapter 12, verses 28 to 32, where Jesus, in a conversation with a teacher of the law, answers the teacher of the law's question, "What is the most important commandment?" Jesus' response to this teacher of the law, who probably was very aware of what the most important commandment was, Jesus responds to him, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all of your strength. The second one is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." And so we have also heard from a variety of other passages in the book of Mark, helping us to flesh this out. What does it mean to follow those two commandments? And we also have our rock pile. We have one more rock to put in place. And so, because it seems to be getting higher, I've asked two youth to come and assist in putting that final rock into place. So Adam Peachy and Madeline Weaver, if you would come forward at this time. I'm going to let them do the lifting. Unlike Alan, I'm just going to let them do all the lifting, and they're going to put it in place for me. So we're putting it right up here, right up on top, okay? Make her help. Here we go. All right, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There you go. Now don't tell me if you do know. What is it? I know for those of you sitting on the wings, this is more difficult. What do we have? I'm going to let you ponder that while we go through the rest of the sermon, but you need to promise to listen. So this morning we are looking at what it means to love the Lord our God with all of our strength. When I say the word strength, what do you think of? How many of you thought physical strength? Okay, most of you, a lot of us, think of a physical strength when we hear the word strength. How strong someone is. How much can they lift? Boys and young men like to prove how strong they are. Have you experienced that? They're either wrestling or they're challenging each other to an arm wrestling match. They're challenging each other in the weight room. Or they're just picking up heavy objects to prove that they can do it. Men and boys like to prove how strong they are. I remember several years ago on a junior high retreat, we were on a hike. We were walking up this trail, and in the middle of the trail, there was this rock. And it was a fairly significant sized rock. And so I challenged one of the junior highers to move that rock. Now, it was embedded in the trail a little bit, and I was beyond confident that this junior higher was never going to move this rock. And so he willingly took the challenge, like all good junior hires would do, and he began to work at moving that rock. And to my surprise, he got it moving, and he kept working at it, and he got it dislodged from the trail. And so he got down and he got his hands and his arms under it, and he picked it up and carried it to the edge of the trail. Needless to say, I and the rest of the leaders were impressed. He had shown his strength. But in the story that Lisa just read for us, we are not talking about a physical strength. In our story, Jesus is at the home of Simon the leper. He is there for a dinner. He's reclining at the table. And the woman comes in. And from other passages, we know that this woman is Mary. Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. And she brings this small bottle of perfume. And we know it is very expensive perfume. She breaks open the bottle and pours it on Jesus. The whole bottle. Very expensive perfume. So expensive that it's worth a year's worth of wages. In that day, it was 300 denarii. Well, my curiosity got the best of me this week. Could I possibly today find perfume worth my year's worth of wages? And since you all know what I make, or at least you can find out by going to the budget, that's about $52,000. So what do you do when you need to find such a remote fact? You go to Google. And I Googled most expensive perfumes. I found one. I found several, actually. And in case you are in the market for very expensive perfume, I'll give you the name of it if I can pronounce it correctly. Come see me afterwards if you need the spelling. It is Baccarat les Larmes Secrets de Thebes. It is available in London, England at Harrods. And it sells for $6,800 an ounce. Now, since we know that the alabaster jar that Mary had was 8 ounces, you take the 8 times the 6,800 and you have $54,400 worth of perfume. I did not confirm that it was made from pure nard. I don't have any plans on buying that perfume for Jenny. So what does all of this have to do with loving God with all of our strength? I'm going to suggest this morning that Mary, in what she did for Jesus, showed us how to love God with all of our strength in 2 ways. The first is in her sacrifice. The second is in her extravagance. These seems like opposite. How can it be extravagant and also sacrifice? Let's take a look. Mary willingly came in with this bottle of perfume and she pours it on Jesus' head, anointing him. She didn't bring a bottle of perfume and say, Jesus, here's this bottle of perfume. You could take it, sell it, and support your ministry. No, she poured it on his head, What a waste. What a waste. And the disciples picked up on this waste. They could not believe she was wasting her resources. And in John's account of this story, it wasn't so much the disciples as possibly just Judas, who had a serious problem with this waste of perfume. Mary willingly sacrificed a year's worth of wages. In some ways, Mary's sacrifice is similar to the poor widow we read about in Mark chapter 12, verse 43. A poor widow came into the temple, and when it was time to put their money into the temple treasury, people came forth and put money in the basket. And Jesus was observing. And this poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins. Jesus, observing this, calls his disciples over to him and says, "Did you see that widow? She put 2 coins in there, and she gave more than all the others because she gave out of everything she had to live on when they had given out of their wealth." The widow and Mary made a sacrifice. Mary's sacrifice also reminded me of the couple that just about a year ago wrote a check for $30,000 plus so that Marilyn Peters could be in Uruguay as we meet here this morning. I don't know what their yearly salary was, but it seemed to be a sacrifice. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't making sense for them to give that much money. It doesn't always make sense to give sacrificially, to give whatever we have, whether it be monetarily or we are just giving ourselves to be used by God. It might not make sense. Extravagance. Extravagance is the second way I believe Mary showed us what it means to love God with all of our strength. For Mary, this was an extravagant act of worship. It showed her complete love, her complete devotion to Jesus. Mary somehow recognized Jesus' impending death. Somehow Mary seemed to understand that Jesus was going to die. You could call it woman's intuition. But if you remember a story in Luke 10, we have Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening. Her sister Martha is busily preparing for the meal that Jesus has come for, and gets frustrated, gets upset. In fact, so upset that she comes to Jesus and says, "Jesus, please tell Mary to get in the kitchen and help." And Jesus' response is, "Relax, Martha, relax. Mary has chosen what is better." Mary has chosen what is better. Follow Mary's example. Mary seems to get it. She understands who this Jesus is. She understands we cannot hold anything back, and that Jesus deserves our extravagant worship. Why does Jesus deserve sacrifice and extravagant worship? Because he has freely given. We have freely received, and so we need to freely give. This is something the disciples should have had a handle on, because that's exactly what Jesus said to them in Matthew chapter 10 when he sent them out. Freely you have received, freely give. The disciples should have understood what this was all about. But Judas and the disciples didn't get it. They didn't understand. They thought this was a waste of perfume, even though in the fact that it was used on Jesus. They didn't get it. They reasoned that the perfume should have been sold, the money given to the poor. They didn't understand what Mary understood. Mary was worshiping Jesus. She was preparing him for his burial. She understood. Jesus had to tell the disciples or Judas to let her alone. Jesus says, what she has done for me is going to be remembered wherever the gospel is preached. Here we are, almost 2,000 years later, sharing the story. How we remember Mary and how we remember Judas are in stark contrast to each other. Judas responds to the situation in a greedy way. And how do we know that? If we read the account in John chapter 12, John says it this way, but one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It's worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Judas did not understand. Jesus wasn't here to build an earthly kingdom. Jesus was building a heavenly kingdom. Mary's extravagant worship of Jesus was just too much for Judas. He could not handle it. Not everybody in our culture can handle it either. It's hard to love Jesus with all of our strength, to extravagantly worship him, to give sacrifices for him. It is a heart matter. It was a heart matter for Mary. It was a heart matter for Judas. And it's a heart matter for us. Let's go back to that junior hire. Diligently working to remove a rock from a path. What are the rocks that you need to remove from your path? What is God calling me? What is God calling you to sacrifice? What is my extravagant worship? To others, it's going to seem like a waste. But I believe God will remember it. It will take all the strength that you have, just like that junior hire took all the strength that he had to pick up that rock and move it to the side of the trail. It will take all the strength that we have to extravagantly worship and give sacrifice to God. It's a matter of the heart. And so we come back to our rocks. How many of you know what it is? I see a few hands. Anybody want to share what they think it is? Yell it out. A man sitting on a rock pile. Close, but not quite. It is a heart. Can you see it? Can you see the heart? Some of you are like, I'm not seeing it. Guess what? This heart is incomplete. If you take this and go up, and then you take this and go down, you get the finished shape of a heart. Like this heart, our journey of faith is not complete. There are rocks missing. It looks abstract. We are on a journey of faith. We need to remove the rocks from our path to complete our heart. Our hearts are still being formed by God. Will you allow your heart to be formed by sacrifice and extravagant worship? Jesus' question was, what is the most important commandment? His reply, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. There is no greater commandment than these. Amen.